So, for the second year in a row, I'm back here at Howl Scream in Tampa, Florida, at Busch Gardens, and I think stuff's about to get wild. So my next big Halloween event for 2019 was to go back to Busch Gardens Howl Scream. I went for the first time last year. I did a video on it, and I had a phenomenal time last year. So I was really excited to go back and do it again. This time I went, I think, technically a week later than I had gone last time. I think last time I had gone the second weekend. This was like the third, I believe. And I found out that last year I had shown up when the haunted house part of things was supposed to start, which I believe this year was like 6:30 or 7. But you actually can get into the park early. Very similar to the Disney thing I did the previous week. So you can get in and you have the whole park, full access to everything, and then it gets shut down and then converted over to the haunted house stuff. And unlike last year, this year I did not do the fast pass because last year I kind of walked onto a lot of things and I didn't really need it. I did every house twice last year. So I really wasn't thinking I was going to need to do it this year. So I got in, and once again, it was just a case of being super hot out. I figured it would be nice to go do a water ride while the rides were still open. So I went kind of to the far back reaches of the park and did Congo River Rapids. So last week, my whole goal of going on Splash Mountain at Disney was to cool off and get wet, and didn't do a very good job of it. Congo River Rapids here did a just slightly better job. And then I kind of just wandered around and looked at some various stuff. I looked at some of the animal stuff. And honestly, unlike Disney where you have a lot of time to go do stuff and things are still open, this was much more restrictive. They were basically blocking off large sections of the park because the haunted houses and scare zones are only in certain areas. And especially with a park that has live animals, it doesn't make sense. You'd probably try to move people away from where the animals are when they don't need to be. It actually really limited the amount of time I had once I got into the park because everything started shutting down. I took the train back to the kind of front right corner of the park, which I guess is where they were telling people to go while they did the switch over to the Halloween stuff. So the train was kind of cool just because it gave you a little different view of things, but once I got off, everything was really just being blocked off. There were some roller coasters that I didn't really want to go on, and it just kind of became a waiting game until they opened up the haunted houses and the scare zones. So my initial plan was to kind of do what I did last year, which was to take the map and follow the numbers. They have, numbered 1 through 6, and I was just going to follow that path around the park. Last year it was a clockwise path. This year it was a counterclockwise path, but it also, number 1 was up kind of in the back of the park, up at the kind of top right of the map, I guess. But the area they were having everybody waiting was more the front section of the park. And that's where one of my favorite houses from last year, Insomnia, was. So I decided to get in a kind of line of other like-minded people who were anxious to get into the house. So it was a pre-line so we can get in the actual line once the house opened. And this kind of begins the trend of this year for Howl Scream. One that was a little disappointing. A lot of the houses were very, very similar to the previous years. And this is only my second year. I don't know if this is a normal thing. I know they tend to hold over a lot of houses. This year there was only one new house that I hadn't seen before. So it does make it a little harder to judge in that respect. But one of the things I did notice is, and this was a theme going across several of the returning houses, is that things started bad in the house. And not bad as in the house was bad. Bad as in like it starts off full on like creepy crap is happening. Last year, Insomnia, it felt like it kind of pulled you in a little more. There was kind of abandoned mental institution look, and to me, it just felt like it sucked you in and kind of brought you into the story of like you're going into what was kind of a normal mental institution and just keeps going downhill and gets worse and worse and worse as you go through it. This year, you walk in the door and at the little reception desk they have up at the front, there's like an inmate throwing a keyboard at you, and it just kind of stays at that level. And I liked the build. I think, In a haunted house, you don't have a lot of time to tell your story or give your, whatever. But I like the idea of doing a build-up, trying to do something a little more cinematic. And I don't know, it just was just straight up, we're just going to turn the knob up to 10 the entire time. And it kind of becomes a little monotonous after a while, to be quite honest. They did have some really cool things that I think were new for this year. I might be wrong, but they had one scene where you go in and it's a bunch of inmates in like a room where it looks like it's like the nuclear apocalypse. There's like a mushroom cloud and some cool effects, gas masks. There's another room where there's some like giant Slayer album cover looking monster thing. So there's some cool stuff, and they brought back some of my favorites. They had the wall that's very like the Nightmare on Elm Street wall, where it's like the spandex and you see somebody pushing out from behind it. They had the room where the walls kind of drift side to side. It kind of makes you feel like you're drunk. They had the room turned on its side. So they brought back a lot of things that I really did like last year. It's just, it really wasn't original at all. I believe it was the exact same floor plan and just a couple extra scenes maybe thrown in. Or they could just be scenes that I forgot about last year, and I'll go back and watch my video from last year and be like, oh yeah, I talked about those last year too. So following the path counterclockwise around the park, the next area I encountered was a scare zone called Deadly Toys. This was their last year. It was on the opposite side of the park last year, but very much the same concept. Very kind of like, child's building blocks. There were creepy looking kids. You heard the piped in audio of like children crying for their parents. There were like toy boxes and things with like gross crap, like body parts and just evil looking stuff in it. Once again, I believe a lot of the same stuff from last year. I believe the first time I went through, it was still daylight and it was missing a lot of actors and effects and things. So my first time through it was kind of a nothing experience, and then as the night went on, it actually got populated. After that was another scare zone called Carpe Noctem. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. I don't speak Latin. Technically, I don't think anybody speaks Latin. But anyway, it was kind of cool. It was just kind of a gothic horror looking thing. They had some cool kind of gargoyle things. The costumes were kind of more in that vein as well. They had a thing off to the side where there were like coffins. I think you could go and take a photo op of like yourself like lying in these coffins that were propped up. It wasn't a very deep scare zone. It was kind of like you got in, you were almost heading out almost immediately. It felt like there wasn't a whole lot in there. But what was there was really nicely themed, and it looks pretty cool, and it was new, so that made me happy as well. But the theming itself was pretty cool. I like that had an old Universal horror kind of vibe to an extent. 80% Universal horror, 20% Anne Rice vampire crap. And then yet another scare zone after that is the Maniac Midway, which they already kind of have this section up in the top area of the park that is like carnival games. And some of the rides up there feel a little more carnival-ish, like things that aren't, you know, you wouldn't have to go to a big theme park to go on these kind of rides type thing. But they're in Busch Gardens. And just like last year, they had a bunch of clowns wandering around. And I think it really works though. You already have that carnival theme going on. It's just really playing off the area you have in the park. So that to me makes total sense. I would totally get why they would do that year after year. It just fits with what's there. So finally, I'm at the Haunted House marked #1 on the guide. So really, not that it's the #1 house, but just that it's, you know, the one. It's designated #1 on the map as in terms of just numbering them. And my goal was to go through the flow of the map, so I'm finally at my starting point, basically. And this was the only new house for the year. It was called The Residence, and I really dug this one. This one was really cool. We start off like outside of a house, so it's basically warning you not to go in, and then some redneck dude's like ushering you, he's like, "Ah, no, ignore him, it's fine," like pushing you in. And then it kind of just goes House of a Thousand Corpses, which is funny because Halloween Horror Nights has a House of a Thousand Corpses house this year. But it was kind of just a generic knockoff. There was some, I don't know, it felt like they were trying to throw in like some like little bits of like, it was like a religious zealot kind of thing, I think in parts. It almost felt like you kind of go through the house, you see different family members, you see different caged up people. I don't know if there's any indication that it's like a cannibal thing. I don't remember. I remember my overall feeling about Howl Scream this year was there was too many damn cannibals. So I believe this house had a cannibal aspect to it as well. But I just like the theme. It was a very cool kind of old dark house kind of idea of just, you know, you stop by a place and get sucked in and then you can't get out. A staple in horror movies, and it worked very well for this. And for the next bit, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in my night. This was actually something I did on my second loop through the park, but I'm going to cover it now just because it fits my loop through progress that I'm trying to do this video in. But up at the very, very top of the map, there is some bumper cars. And last year, I didn't go on them, but one of the things they had was that you could get in the bumper car. I think last year was a clown. I think it was still kind of carrying over from the Maniac Midway. They had a bunch of like evil clowns that would be in some of the cars on the bumper cars. This year they went back to zombies. I believe zombies have been what they'd had in the past. So to me that felt very fitting. And that was goofy fun. It was interesting. They had a lot of like fog and lighting effects in there. And there was only one cart with zombies. There were 2 zombies in the cart, but just one cart. Some of the earlier go-throughs I saw, there were 2 separate carts with zombies. So I was a little bummed there were fewer targets, but it was fun to do. It was just a goofy thing, and I think it was just an experience that I'm not going to get all that often at any other park. The next scare zone was Camp DOA, another returning one from last year. This one I believe was in the exact same spot it was in last year. And it was actually really cool. I like the scare zone a lot. It has a very kind of, I don't want to say Friday the 13th vibe because that's giving the wrong impression, but if you took all of the like 80s camp horror movies, put them in a blender, you'd kind of get this. Got some kind of like redneck zombie kind of characters in it. It's got some creepy looking masked killers in it. There's just various scenes of like death and dismemberment throughout a campsite or campground. Not campground, it's like a, you know, like a summer camp, I guess, basically. And I don't know, it's some cool theming. I'm a sucker for that anyway, so I thought that one worked pretty well.
You're walking too fast. Get him. That's making a monster, and if I drop it, I swear to God.
Hi.
I was ever trying to stick around.
Doesn't it feel like
And next up is the best haunted house they have, the Black Spot. If you can't tell, I am totally not sincere about any of that because this house sucks. This one is just not that great. It's a pirate theme. Some of the design work on it looks good. Like, it was almost exactly the same as it was last year. I couldn't see any differences, but it was just boring. It's like a confused concept. I don't know what the pirates are doing. They might be cannibals too. You're kind of in some undersea parts. There's like some treasure in it in places, and then just pirates yelling at you. And like, I kind of was thinking about this. I think it might just be because it's Tampa. Tampa has a thing about pirates. They have the Gasparilla Parade every year. That's just a giant pirate parade. And, you know, that side of Florida had its own share of like pirate history and stuff back in the day. But I don't know if that's why they just insist on keeping this pirate themed house, or if it's just the area that it's in is just themed in such a way that like it's perfect for pirates and nothing else could possibly go there except for pirates. But the house is lame. It's just not one I enjoy. And being the same as last year, like I said, almost as much as I could tell, it was exactly the same as last year. It just didn't help things. The only plus side is this year, unlike last year, it didn't rain halfway through my night. So the stuff that's outside, which there's a decent amount of stuff that's outside of the house itself, that was still active when I went through it, as opposed to last year where I think the second go round it was all deserted. Next up, we have another scare zone, this one called Little Nightmares, and I'm trying to remember what it even was. And that probably says a lot about how impactful it was on me. I want to say it was very similar to the toy one that was on the opposite side of the park this year, but was in that spot the year previous. I think it was just supposed to be evil little kids. So it didn't really make much difference that they changed it. I don't know. It's like to do the same scare zone twice. And then outside of that is the area that, same as last year, there's a bunch of people hidden in the bushes. It's a very dark section of road. One thing about Howl Scream, it is dark. It is a very, very dark event. They don't have a lot of lights on at all. And it's really easy to just kind of find yourself in an area that's just really dark and creepy looking. And this one walkway, they just have people dressed as bushes that are jumping out at you. I do believe Little Nightmare did a little bit of that stuff as well. There are people kind of hiding in the bushes. I think some guy just started not even yelling, but just talking to people in a Cockney accent. And I don't know if that was supposed to be scary, but that's what happened. But I kind of consider that and the people dressed as bushes to be all kind of part of one giant flowing thing. This area also, I guess, is the kiddie section of the park. They have like a Sesame Street thing, so there's some Sesame Street elements there. So I don't know if that's intentional, that the theming just goes along with the Sesame Street stuff that's already there, but to me that doesn't really work all that well. It's not like the Maniac Midway where it kind of makes sense. This This is just like, could have just made it scary and then just so happened there were some little kiddie elements around it. Or just keep the dangerous toys or whatever the thing was called in that area and then use the non-themed out area where that was this year for something else.
Last year, not this year.
Alright, so can you warn me of anything?
It's amazing.
Am I gonna pee my pants?
Stop at the bathroom first, you'll be fine.
Alright. So is it really scary?
I can't say it's really scary, but it's like really well themed. Like it was my favorite last year, so I'm hoping it's gonna be really good this year too.
Okay. You're not touch right?
I'm sorry?
They can't touch us, right?
I don't think they can, no.
If they touch me, I'm touching back.
Busch is alive. Are Cockney accents scary? I kind of think they're not. God, Big Bird's terrifying.
Next up is kind of one of the haunted houses that has a scare zone kind of built into it. This was one of the ones I believe was new last year. It's Simon's Slaughterhouse and the Meat Market scare zone that leads up to it. It's its own path, so you have to go through the Meat Market scare zone to get to the house, but unlike some of the other scare zones, if you're just going around the park, you don't have to go into the meat market. And this year, I forget if it was there last year, but they actually had a quick way to go through. Because the meat market, beyond being just kind of a very exaggerated Texas chainsaw kind of thing where it's just shacks of cannibal stuff and it's just a bunch of ugly redneck looking shacks and meat hanging off it that's obviously human remains for some of the parts at least. There's old timey trucks. It's kind of a 50s thing going on. They're playing old timey 50s music and instructions on slaughtering stuff, which is a really cool theming. I like that kind of retro horror feel that they go with it. The costumes are kind of Leatherface-esque, sometimes a little more gorier looking than Leatherface, I guess. A little more standard haunted house fare where it's try to push it to the extreme kind of thing. And that area also has several photo op areas. It has some food vendors. So I could see the express kind of area. I assume it literally is a shortcut and not like some joke that you go in there and it's like even worse than the main line. I could almost see that happening to some degree, but if you can't handle the meat market, you're definitely not going to be able to handle the house at the end of it anyway.
Right, well, let's keep going. For my first crowd.
Yeah, just put the lid on it. You have time to do it. Sorry.
But Simon's Slaughterhouse was one of the ones that had the longest wait this year, or at least for me. It was a fairly long line to get through. And the house, I believe, is identical to last year again. You have the outside facade, that's like the slaughterhouse. There's a door for cattle, poultry, and pigs. And you have a masked guy kind of pushing you through one of the three doors, just kind of in groups. And I think it splits off, then reforms back inside the house. So I think it's just a slight crowd control way to get more people in quickly. But once again, I feel like this could have just benefited from almost being not changed from last year. The house layout was the same, but last year there was this whole kind of thing, and maybe it was there this year, I couldn't see it. But it was noticeable last year and not this year that the whole Simon Slaughterhouse was like a play on Simon Says. So it's, you know, Simon Says, and there's like an instruction. As it goes on, it gets progressively worse, and it's like, you know, Simon says cut. Simon says die. Simon says burn. The idea was like, if you follow what Simon says, you can make it out alive, but things just became telling you to die, basically, or things that would be lethal. This year I didn't see any of that, so there was no real story behind it this year. It was just scenes from a slaughterhouse. I believe all the major set pieces were the same. You see people getting ground up for meat. You see people being like burned, the remains being burned in this kind of cave section at the end. There's cages. I think last year it had like either animal people or like human-animal hybrids. I think they had like tasers and stuff, or like fake tasers that they were like throwing at you. This time it was just the generic leather-facey kind of dudes in there. So I think it kind of failed a little bit on that side as well. Just that some of the theming that was carried over just wasn't as good. Across the way, back through the meat market, is my favorite house from last year, Motel Hell.
Shelter is the same, and you are about to become his very own guest.
And the thing I love so much about this house is the theming. It is themed to look like a crappy motel, and they do such a great job of making it look like that. There's like a little desk outside, you go into a reception area, there's a laundry room, there's hotel bedrooms, hallways, outdoor like pool, shuffleboard area. It is themed beautifully. This year it was Motel Hell Infestation, meaning that it was full of bugs this time. And a lot of the scare actors were dressed in like exterminator suits. So it was like Dale Gribble with a gas mask on or something. But actually, I feel like that took away from it, because last time it's like a hotel and there's dead things in it. And that's still there. That whole layer of like dead ghost hotel or whatever is still present. But if you add bugs on top of it, why would you send exterminators into a hotel to get rid of bugs if it's just full of corpses? Like, that didn't make sense to me. And it just felt, once again, kind of like Insomnia, where you're just like trying to add on to the horror, but you're just kind of making it confused and taking away some of the build-up that helped it originally. So I was kind of disappointed. It didn't take away a lot. A lot of the same things there from last year, a lot of the same scares that I loved were still there. So this is my complaint this whole time. A little watered down because I'd already seen it. The bug overlay didn't add a whole lot, but just randomly having people step out in gas masks when it could have been something just to go more with the original theme and be like a ghost or something. I would have preferred it be like last year again, as opposed to this new overlay. Kind of very similar assignment Slaughterhouse, very similar complaint there. Then after that was the Hell on Wheels scare zone, and this is another holdover from last year, I believe. Very, very similar to how it was last year, though this time going the opposite direction. I think I'd said last year that my initial go through had been going clockwise across the map, and you miss some of the theming of that scare zone because it's only on the other end of the scare zone. So this time going counterclockwise, I got to go through that theming section first, and it does have like audio playing talking about basically a zombie plague, but talking about, you know, in that horror movie way where you're not going to say zombie because, you know, you can't have zombie movies in the universes where you're going to have zombies appear in real life, right? Unless it's a zombie comedy. But anyway, so you go through, and this time I wasn't really able to tell who was supposed to be like zombies and who was supposed to be like the containment people, because there's guys in like armor, and I'm assuming they're the containment guys, and there's like caged up zombies and some like free walking things out there as well. There's a bunch of towers that are really cool. There's like vehicles throughout with machine guns strapped to them, very Mad Max looking, or Dawn of the Dead remake looking. And I think the guys still had the leaf blowers from last year, though nobody like blew one in my face this year, which somehow was kind of disappointing. It was kind of funny last year, especially because I got to use that stupid SpongeBob clip. But this was actually nice, even though it was the same. Like I said, I went through it from the right direction this time. And then last year, I had gone through it twice. Once when it was just opening and some of the actors weren't out yet. And then again, after it had stormed and everybody was gone from the streets and all the scare zones were shut down. So this time I actually got to see it in full population because it was the last one I went through in that loop. So I got to see the people in cages I didn't get to see last year, and there were definitely just more actors throughout it. Then making it back up to the very front of the park, there was another holdover. I don't know why I keep saying that because they're all holdovers except for one, and that was Deathwater Bayou. Another favorite of mine from last year. Once again, don't think they changed anything. It's a voodoo-themed house. You kind of go through like a voodoo shack. There's a priestess in there doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Then you're going through the swamp. Some great scares, some cool bungee things, some people that are very well hidden. You think it's a static prop, and then somebody jumps out. One thing they did that was really cool is they had two scare actors next to each other, which I don't see very often. One was like normal height, and the other was either connected to a prop or they were on stilts or something, so they're up higher. And to me, that was like really cool because it was like you kind of see the one, and it's like, okay, that's the guy, you know, I know to expect it. And the thing next to him moves, and that actually like caught me off guard, and I thought that was really cool because you never see two scare actors together in a thing like that. And there's some really cool ones where it would be like a mask that would just drop down, but it didn't look like it could drop down. So it's a really good mess tracks. I like it. And they also have one of those tunnels where it's like swirling around you to get really disoriented. And those are always kind of fun. One thing they did take out this year, I think, was I believe last year in one of the forest sequences, there was this woman like on a stump. I think she's supposed to be like a voodoo priestess or something. And like the way the line curved, I actually went the wrong way when I was at the head of a group. So I think they modified that because I never saw the spot that I got lost last year. It was very clear where you were supposed to go this year. Another cool thing just being that New Orleans theme, they have like a graveyard with like a bunch of bands and stuff, and you have to like go underneath a coffin. So you actually have to like crouch down and like go underneath these people carrying a casket, which I thought was really neat. But same as last year, except for maybe that one little tweak to make it so you don't get lost in it, but one I really enjoyed. And last but not least, there was another scare zone, the Dia de los Muertos. It's not really a scare zone. It's more just like people in sugar skull costumes dancing around and some shrines. And yeah, not particularly scary, but it's a cool little themed area. And the area it's in, within Busch Garden Zone theming, I think it works really well. It fits in with everything else. How to rank all this? You know, it's a bit of a mixed bag this year because it was just so much of the same, and I don't want to be unfair to the things that were holdovers, but I also don't want to like give something a pass just because I'm thinking I might be a little biased against it. So it may not be the most fair thing, but I'm probably going to give the Residence the #1 spot. I really enjoyed the theming of it. I like the concept of it. So I really don't think it's just because it was the only new house. I think it did genuinely have some really good merit to it. After that, oh man, I'm torn. I think I might give it to Deathwater Bayou, sadly enough. I want to say Motel Hell. Like, I want to kind of repeat my rankings from last year again, just because I wanted Motel Hell to be so good. But Deathwater Bayou, in being not changed for the better or worse, really, I guess slightly for the better because they fixed the one thing I had a problem with it last year. That was just fun. I enjoyed it. It was nice. I really liked that whole experience. So I'm going to give Deathwater Bayou spot #2. Closely after, I'll say Motel Hell. Despite the bug thing, it still worked. It still had the elements that I enjoyed of it last year. It's just kind of an unnecessary overlay. Insomnia right after, same complaint, just they went a little too try hard with it this year. But I think, you know, if you do a little something different with it next year, or bring it back a little bit and have it build and have the insanity grow in a more natural progression again, like it did the first year, I think it could be really solid again. Then after that, Simon Slaughterhouse, once again, solid. The lack of theming, it's not even like they added anything to it. They removed stuff from it in like a small way, but it just didn't do it for me as much as it did last time. And that might just be because the novelty wasn't there. But yeah, I'll give that one the next spot, 5th spot. And all these, I mean, they're all good. That's the thing. All 5 so far of the 6, they're good. They're fun. It's just, you know, a lot of repeats. And then at the bottom of the barrel is Black Spot. Get rid of this stupid house. I hate it. Do something else. I'm sick of the pirates. Heck, you know, like, do something else water-based. You don't want to make new sets, or you don't want to do too much new. Make it a Viking thing, or make it, you know, something else water-based. I don't know. The whole thing's like a cave-looking thing. Make it like a cave type thing. Make it the Descent or something kind of idea. But this thing just did not work for me. It hasn't worked for me last year. It doesn't work for me this year. Yeah. That's basically where I am with it. So with not having the Fast Pass, this was a much busier night. So I didn't get to do as much as I did last year. Fast Pass only works once. I think you have like 6 charges on it. So if you want to use it for each house, you can do each house once with the Fast Pass. Or you could use it on, you know, one house multiple times and just punch off the thing. So it's not limited to which house it is that you're going on. It's just limited in the number of times you could use it. So in not doing that, I ended up losing a lot of time on Simon Slaughterhouse's line. So I didn't do everything twice. I did everything once and in one big loop. Then I went back. I did Insomnia for a second time. I did The Residence for a second time. I did Motel Hell a second time. And I did Deathwater Bayou a second time. So really, like, not bad. I made 2 full loops around the park during the event time itself. I had made about 3/4 of a loop before taking the train back before the park had closed. But that was more just kind of wandering around and doing one ride. So it is possible to experience everything without a Fast Pass, at least this time that I went. This was very first weekend of October. So I'm sure as it gets closer to Halloween, need for a Fast Pass probably grows. But also, Howl Scream offered like a lot of deals and things. So if you're planning on going, you could actually end up attending this thing for like dirt cheap, especially if you're not doing a Fast Pass. So don't let my kind of grumpiness over the lack of changes this year dissuade you if you've never been. If you've never been, go, because when it's all new to you, it's a lot more enjoyable, I think. I think that was the wall I hit this year. For returning, you know, I really would be curious to see what they do next year. I think if they announce it's going to be 5 of the same houses, and we're just going to do one new one or something like that next year, I might be less inclined to go. It was fun, but not enough fun that like I need to subject myself to it for minimal difference. There's other haunted houses in the state I can go to, other things I can experience. But if they throw in 2 or 3 new houses and, you know, maybe talk about doing some new and exciting things with the ones that are there or something like that, yeah, I could definitely be totally on board to go again next year. So I really hope that they make some right moves there. The other thing I didn't get to experience this year that I missed out on last year too was, I know they have like actors even on the trams bring you into the parking lot, and they had last year a ton of people. As soon as you got in the gates, there was just a flood of actors out before you even got into the park proper. It was just when you got off the tram from the parking lot. This year, because I went early and took advantage of the extra time the ticket gives you, none of that was out there yet because you don't want that running, I guess, during normal park hours. So I did miss out on that. I don't know. I think next year, unless I really have something I really want to do during the day, I might just save it to tonight if I go and just get to experience that part of things. So that was my Friday night, and then on Saturday, I went to see Sabaton and Hammerfall, also in Tampa. This was initially the reason I was in Tampa, or one of the 2 reasons. I came down for Guar, and then I just basically worked it so I could stay through the Sabaton Hammerfall concert, and then this other things kind of fell into place in between. And yeah, I'll throw in some footage here.
Gentlemen, in case you didn't know until now, this is this young man's birthday today! What do you say, everybody? I think it's time to sing for Mr. Joakim Brodén here.
friend. You fucking cunt. Alright, let's do this. Of course you got those, right? Who said violence solves nothing? Alright, I guess we're having cake. You guys want some cake? Yeah! I'm gonna serve a bit of cake to some of these lovely people.
And that closes the chapter on my 6th Sabaton show. It's the van down there, or the truck they're loading up. It's pretty good. Not my favorite of the bunch, but it was fun, as always.